Welcome to the overview and demonstration of Facil data management software. Facil is a program that we've developed to assist media access centers in managing and maintaining all the information that they need to operate their organization. Facil is a database program that runs on a network of PCs and lets everyone in your organization view, edit, and report on the same data all the time, up to date, moment to moment as your organization operates. It keeps track of many different kinds of data, all important to a media access center. I'm going to start the program and we'll take a look at the main menu, and this will help us see what the different data areas in Facil are. Let's look at each of the different choices on the main menu. Person will give us information about all the people that your organization works with, whether you call them members, clients, your own staff, producers, every person that you come into contact with or need to maintain information on. And this data area will give you access to all of their contact information and keep track of what they've been doing in your organization. Organizations, of course, are groups of people, and many media access centers, you may be working with nonprofit organizations, community organizations, commercial entities, and we can keep track of all of the organizations and, of course, the relationship of the people to those organizations, which people are part of which organizations. A person can belong to any number of different organizations. We track classes because most media access centers require training and orientation for people who are going to use their facilities. And this will allow you to schedule your classes, register people, and keep track of who has achieved what levels of equipment certification and completed which classes. Most organizations have some form of volunteering where people share their abilities and services with each other, and the volunteer finder lets you keep track of who is offered to volunteer and find the people that you need to work on any given project. Payments. A complete point-of-sale system to allow you to collect fees or payments, whether you're selling videotapes, selling promotional t-shirts, collecting membership fees, any financial transaction you want to do with your members or anyone else, you can collect money here, issue receipts, refunds, and of course there's an analysis system to allow you to see what kind of revenues you've taken in. We have a complete mechanism for tracking projects. Generally, we think of a project as a production project where one or more programs will be produced, but a project could be, for example, training or community outreach. Anything you want to use to group together work that's being done, whether that's personnel or the use of facilities. And of course, when we do produce programs, those are grouped into projects. The program data gives the individual information on every program that you have available to show, whether those programs are locally produced or acquired externally. And of course, those are connected with the projects and with the people and with the organizations. All the data in Facil is related together to ensure accuracy and to reduce the effort of data entry so that when you refer to a person, for example, his address is recorded in one place and you don't need to continuously re-enter it. We have a complete mechanism for program scheduling. If you're showing your programs on one or more channels, this will allow you to schedule all the programming events second by second on any number of channels for as long a period of time into the future as you would like. There's also a powerful auto schedule mechanism which allows you to schedule repeating patterns of programs every Monday, Wednesday, Friday from now until. That type of automation. This saves a lot of time when setting up schedules. Of course, equipment and reservations are at the heart of what Facil can do. Reservations are set to tell us who is using equipment or facilities, when they will be in use, and you can reserve any number of different items from a microphone cable up to a studio for each project at any time, for any person. And Facil will always ensure that you're never duplicating reservations where you have double bookings. It'll ensure that the items that you're reserving are available. It tracks the quantities of the item. a fully comprehensive system for reserving and scheduling all of your equipment and facilities. The reservation viewer, appointment book, and the 2-week appointment book are all ways of viewing and managing and organizing the reservation data. Here's the equipment form, and that of course lets us keep our exact inventory. We have not only the kinds of items that are being scheduled and reserved, but also records for every individual item that will maintain your purchase records, costs of items, who it was purchased from, and so on. And in addition to that, maintenance records on every piece of equipment, as many maintenance events as take place. Tapes for your tape library, recorded programs. Facil will also schedule programs that are not on tape if you're doing satellite feed, computer-generated bulletin board, or any other format of programming. But the tape library, of course, will tell you what programs are on which tapes, where they're located, everything you need to know. We also have powerful reporting mechanisms, and Facil has a very powerful mailing and contact mechanism that works with the list of people. It works with organizations. You can have customized mailing lists. You can do mailings to everyone who has a reservation for a particular date and time, for a particular piece of equipment, a mailing to everyone who's registered for a class, all of which can be done in the form of mail merge to word processing for form letters and so on. You can do envelopes, you can do labels, and you can do mass email automatically using the Facil mailing system. So those are all the different areas. We're going to look at each one of these, give you a quick view of what it can do for you. To be thorough about looking at the main menu, at the bottom of the main menu, we also have a help system. We know what the day and date is, who the current user, and of course Facil has a login mechanism, so we know who's using the program, and that takes care of recording who does which reservation and so on. Here we have all the information about what version of Facil we're using, who it's licensed to, and so on, and of course an exit for when you're through using Facil at the end of the day. Let's start our review of Facil by looking at the person form that holds all the data on everyone that your organization has contact with. You may have members, you may have producers, volunteers, clients, whatever role people play when they're working with your organization. We'll keep track of everyone here on the person form. Here's the main menu. We'll select the person form. And you can see that this form, like many others in Facil, has multiple parts to it. Across the top are a set of buttons or tabs that allow us to look at different data areas that have to do with each person. We'll take a little wider shot so we can see the whole form, and let me demonstrate just quickly how you switch from one part of the data to another. Just by touching each button, you can see that it will show us whichever part of the data we want to see. So in reviewing the data, we'll start with the first tab. We call that the person tab, that has the contact data. And you can see that across the top we have data to keep track of who this person is, an ID number, what type of person they are. You can define your own types. Again, you may use the term member, it may be volunteers, it may be just contacts. You want to keep track of everyone on this list, whether they actually work within your organization or not. Could be city officials, cable company people, anyone that you have contact with, and you can define what type of person they are, what their role is in your organization. Set up as many of these choices as you want. Status would be for someone who is a member or more part of your organization with active, inactive, or suspended status. The date joined, or the first date of contact with the person. If it is a membership type situation, you can have an expiration date. And very important in Facil, you can have an allocation. The allocation is a dollar amount that represents the amount of resources and facilities that you want this person to be allowed to consume. Facil has a complete mechanism for tracking the value of every facility or piece of equipment that is reserved and totaling the value received by the person. It also does it by organization. It also does it by project. So we're tracking resource consumption by person, organization, and project, and this allows both reporting and an ability to use this to balance the consumption of resources across these different people, different organizations, and so on. It's a powerful and important part of Facil. Of course, we have the standard contact information, name, address, multiple phone numbers, a email address. We're going to keep track of whether this person is given permission for their information to be given out. In other words, if it's okay to share their phone number, perhaps they're a volunteer. And at the bottom, we have two text boxes. One is general notes, and these notes are only seen when you look at the member form, so you can keep whatever information you want there. The notice text is a piece of text that will appear, a message that will appear every time you do something with this person, whether that means making a reservation form, putting them in a class, taking a program from them, anything you need to know, and you will not have to look at the member form. This message will always appear automatically when you have a transaction with this person. That's the notice text. Also, on the right side of the form, we have a set of command buttons that let us do more with the person. Payment will open a payment form so we can collect a fee or sell materials or any other financial transaction with this person. Of course, we can send them an email directly from within Facil that works with your already installed email program, and we'll open an email form with the address already filled in. Printing an envelope if you want to do paper mail using this person's address. And then we have buttons to see this person's project or projects, a list of any projects that they're the producer of, and reservations, showing you a list of all reservations that this person has made. And this uses the viewer tool that we'll be looking at a little later. So that's the main form for person. And we have, as we saw before, a number of other tabs. Let's look at a couple of these quickly. We have the ability to track both volunteer availability and volunteer service. In other words, what does the person want to do in terms of being a volunteer, and what have they done as a volunteer? Let's look at availability first. There are three lists. One is the areas the person wants to volunteer in. The next is program subjects that the person would like to work on. And the last one is production types that the person would like to work on. For example, a production type might be a live field production or a studio live production. By filling in these lists and selecting from choices, and again, these are all choices that you would define in your own Facil installation, your own terminology, we now know what kinds of programs this person would like to work on, and we're able, excuse me, to find all the available volunteers for any particular kind of program. On the next tab, we have volunteer service, and here we're going to track every occurrence of volunteering for this person, so we know how many volunteer hours they put in. We're able to keep track of how much volunteering was done for given projects on given dates. We'll fill one in very quickly. We can use the calendar to select the date. Here's our list of volunteer areas. Again, your own definition. How many hours the person volunteered. And we need to say what project they worked on. Of course, we have an existing list of projects, and by clicking the button here, instead of dropping down, we'll get a little search form. Oh, excuse me, 2 hours. Here's our project search form. I can put in a keyword if I want to restrict the list of projects. If you have thousands of projects, you probably want to do that. Or I can just click and look at the entire list of projects, pick the one I want, and there's my completed volunteer service record with date, what area they volunteered in, how many hours, and what project it was for. We also have tabs here in the person form for mailing lists and organizations. A simple list. Again, you'll define your own mailing list titles. You can have as many as you want. One person can belong to any number of different mailing lists. And then when you do the mailing, of course, the lists can be merged so that you're only sending one communication to each person. Organizations that the person belongs to. You can have as many organizations as you have contact with, and a person can belong to as many of those organizations as is appropriate. The Facil person form has a section where you can record demographic information about each person. And that demographic information can be whatever it is you need it to be. Education level, income level, ethnicity, Maybe you want to keep track of what county the person is in. Anything that you can define a question with multiple choice answers for. And you can have up to 20 demographic questions, and each of those questions can have any number of multiple choice answers that you select. And by filling in the demographic information, then of course there's a associated report, and that report will tell you what number and what percentage of the people gave each answer to each question. Also, when you're running that report, you'll be able to select types of persons so that you can report demographics, for example, only for your producers and not include other contacts you might have in your person list. You can also select by status so that you can report demographics only for the active persons or perhaps only the inactive persons. Any breakdown of people you choose. So if we go back to the demographics form, we have some questions defined here, and these are actually the questions that were included in earlier versions of Facil before we made it possible for you to define your own. So to carry it forward, these are the original Facil demographic questions. If we look, for example, what is your age range? And these are the ranges that are predefined. So I can pick any one of those, go on to the next, what ethnic group do you belong to, and so on. And it's just that easy to acquire the demographic information. There are two other fixed fields. One is the date of birth, and of course that has a calendar associated with it. The other is a social security number in the appropriate format. None of this, of course, is required for you to use Facil, to use the other features of Facil, but many organizations find it useful to do this kind of demographic reporting. Let's take a real quick look at how you define the questions and answers. Now you'll notice that we have 7 questions right now. They're all on the left side of the form, and of course I said you can have up to 20, so there would be 10 questions down one side, 10 questions down the other side if you defined all 20. Our last question here is your household a cable subscriber? So we're going to go and define a new one now. I'm going to go back to the main menu, select admin, and of course that takes me to the Facil admin menu. And right here is a button, Demographic Q&A. And there are the 7 questions we have defined. And as I touch each question, you'll notice that on the right is the list of answers. And of course, it changes to show the list of answers for the currently selected question. You'll also notice if you scroll down that there are already 20 records here because you can't have more than 20 questions. The records are predefined, it's a fixed number, and then they're either filled in or they're blank. If they're blank, nothing appears on the form. So we're simply going to fill in the next blank space, and we'll say, for example, what kind of pet do you own? And we'll ignore any spelling errors there. Now I just go over to the answers column, and of course I made a change there, so I save the change. Now I'm in the answers column. I'll have an answer dog, save it, an answer cat, save it, and we'll do one more, save it. So now I have my original question here, my new question here, what kind of pet do you own? Dog, cat, fish. We go back to the main menu, select person again, go back to the demographics form, and there's our new question at the bottom, and there are our 3 choices. And that's the demographics tab. Last but not least, the expenditures form. If we look over here, we see the tab marked expenditures. And this shows us a chart of all the resources that this person has consumed in dollar values, all their facilities and equipment consumption. This person hasn't done much work. I'm going to pick somebody else real quickly. And again, we have a form that lets us search by last name for the person. And now we're looking at that person's records, Dan Burstein. You can go from one person to another regardless of what you're looking at here. So now I'm looking at Dan Burstein, and here's Dan's expenditures broken down by date periods. One more tab that we didn't cover, classes. This is simply a record of all the classes that this person has registered for. It shows what kind of a class it was. We call that a certification code, and the concept of classes are to train people to use different equipment and facilities. Here he's taken 2 different editing classes and the field production basics class. Did he complete the class and become certified? Yes, and here's the date. Now you may have noticed, let's go back, say, to the organization form, that we have this green dot button next to each organization record. Same thing on the classes. We have a green dot button next to each class registration. This button, wherever you see it in Facil, is a link to more data that relates to what you're looking at. In the case of the class list, this would be a link to their specific registration record for that class. You'd be able to see who else was in the class, who the instructor was, everything about that class registration. If we look at organizations, of course, the link button would take us to the organization form, giving us all the information about that organization. One of the new features of Facil is the ability to include a photo of each person that you have on your person list. If we look at the person form and we've selected the photo tab, you can see right here the picture that's associated with it. Now, there's a complete explanation in the help file of how this works mechanically in terms of acquiring and storing the photos. Basically, of course, you would take your own digital photos with whatever tool you have, a digital camera or a digitized video, and the photos are not saved in the Facil database. They're saved separately in a directory of your choosing as standard computer photo files in the JPEG format. All of this is explained in detail in the help file. The naming of the photo files that links them to Facil is done simply by using the ID number. If we look down here on the form, we can see it says photo file name. This happens to be member number 1, which we could see if we went back to the main tab. We would say membership, or person number 1. And all the file names have an 8-character name. So there's 7 zeros and a 1, .jpg. That's the default file name. So by simply naming the files with the 8-character number and matching it to the person ID number, it's all taken care of. Then, in addition to just seeing the photo on the form, let's go to another person so we can see a different photo. There's Forrest. As you see, each photo appears as we look at the different people. If I want to print an ID card, all I have to do is click a button here. Now, there are 3 buttons, and the reason is that the pre-formatted ID cards that Facil is designed to work with, which again is in the help file, it's an Avery form, there are 3 per form, 3 cards per form, and then they're self-laminating. And because there are 3 per form, and you may not necessarily print them in even groups of 3, you have the choice here of printing the first label on the form, second label, or third label, so that you can use a partially used sheet. So that's why there are 3 different buttons, but they all do the same thing. I'll click, and this is what the ID card looks like when it's actually printed. And you see the person's name, photo, their ID number right here. These 3 pieces of information are optional in the system settings. You can choose whether or not these are included on the ID card printout. You can include the join date, you can include the expiration date, and you can include the person type. Or you can have any one of those, any combination, or leave them all off. At the bottom here, it says unlicensed Facil demo. That's the organization name. So it would say the name of your organization right there on the ID card. This is your logo or whatever logo you want to use on the card. That's the Becker Software logo, and you can insert, again, a digital file, a bitmap file, that will allow you to print your own logo of roughly a square shape on the ID card. And last but not least, there is a barcode on the ID card, and of course that matches the person ID, which would allow you to find that person's record by swiping their card while you're looking on the person form. It could have a number of other uses. You could use it to enter their number on a reservation, whatever you wanted to do. If we pull out a little bit and widen the shot so we can see the whole report at one time, if you zoom on out, on the left is just some printed information that will appear on your printout so that you know which ID card is which. It shows the photo file name and the join date, and so on again. Also, you'll notice there are crop marks. If you're printing on the pre-made Avery ID card, the pre-laminated card, it's already pre-cut, of course. But if you're printing on plain paper and you're going to make your own ID cards, then these crop marks will give you a cutout to show the ID card correctly. And of course, this ID card printed at the top of the page because we selected label position 1. If we had pushed the button for label position 2, it would have printed in the middle of the page. I'll close this now. Of course, here we just print one ID card at a time, but if you want to do a batch of ID cards, there is a report that allows you to select by range of member numbers. It'll actually even allow you to look at a list of, of person ID numbers. It'll allow you to look at a list of people and select which individual ones you want to print in a scattered, if you have a few new people scattered around. So there's full flexibility to print either one or a batch of ID cards using either these buttons here on the person form or the report, the ID card report in the report menu. So that covers the photo and ID card. The last thing that's available on the person form, and I'm going to go back to the main tab. In earlier versions of Facil, a lot of people wanted simply to print this information and information on these other tabs. And there was really no way to do that in Facil, and they would print the screen and get a picture, so to speak, that had the command buttons on it and so on and so forth. Not a very satisfactory solution. So what we've added is a report that prints a summary of all the information about the person you're looking at. And the button for that is right up here at the top, and it has the little notebook icon, and when you point at it, it says print summary report for this person. So let's click that button, and what we get is a dialog box, person summary report options. And we can move in a little bit on that, and it tells us basically these are the same 8 tabs that you have on the form. Which of those information do you want? Now, of course, the first tab, the person tab with the name, address, and so on, that's always included. But the other 8 tabs, you can turn on and off whether you want to include that information. You can select the date range for expenditure just the way you do on the expenditure form itself. So this lets you customize the report. By default, everything is included. I'll click the preview, and when we widen out again, now we'll see the report, person data summary, and it starts off, and the information is grouped exactly the way it is on the form. The first section is the person tab, volunteer availability tab, classes, mailing lists, organizations, demographics, expenditure, exactly the same thing you see on the form, including even the photo ID. Let me scroll up on page 2 and so on. So it's everything that you see on the form in a nicely formatted report, and you can select which parts of that information you want to include or not include. So it's a very handy new tool to collect all the data on one person in a quick printed report. And returning to the main member form, or the main person form, we can see all the information, and I think we've covered everything about that. There's one other thing we'll take a quick look at. Up in the upper right corner, and this is true on all Facil forms, there is a help button. The help button has information for you actually in 2 ways. When you simply point at it, as I'm doing now, you can see that a little yellow box pops up. That's called a control tip, and it shows us the special keystrokes that are available for use on this form. We can see here that the keystroke, for example, the keystroke Alt-S, we point at this, Alt-S brings up the search box to search by name. Alt-X will close the form. So if you're keyboard oriented and it can be a little quicker to do data entry using the keyboard, those are some of the keystrokes that are available. The second purpose of the help button, of course, is to click on it, and it will bring up the Facil help form. And whichever form we're looking at, we were looking at the person form, we're going to get the help for that form in a context-sensitive help system, always showing you the help that you need. And the help topics can be quite long. They can be several pages, in fact, to tell you everything you need to know about the form that you're working with. You'll notice also at the top of the help form is a printer button, and of course that will print this help topic for you so that you can refer to it further, or you can use the report menu and print all the help topics at one time. At the bottom of the help form, whenever you're using the help form, you have the choice of looking at any other help topic. You can see it says select topic, and here in alphabetical order is a list of the help topics. We'll drop down a little bit and take a look at that. You may want to look at the topic about data entry or copying and pasting data while you're working in the form. So we'll select copy and paste data, and here's our help information on that topic. So that covers the person form and a little bit about the Facil help system. Of course, when we close the help form, we'll still be looking at the person form, and you can have multiple forms open in Facil. If we take a shot of the entire screen here, we'll see that we have the person form. Of course, the menu, we can leave the person form open and go back to the menu anytime, open another form if we want. We can open the help form and work with all of them at the same time. That can be very powerful in Facil, letting you do things like look at a reservation and the person record at the same time, project and program records at the same time. Makes it much simpler and easier to use. So that gives you a lot of the basics and tells you all about the person data. Let's look at the mailing system in Facil. And actually the use of the word mailing is a little narrow. It really does much more than that. Here's the form for mailing to people in Facil. And it's a fairly big form. You see there's a lot of empty space here, but it won't be empty for long as we go through using the form. There are two tabs on the mailing form, selection and output. And of course, selection deals with deciding who we're going to be contacting, and output actually does the production of the labels, envelopes, or whatever type of output we're going to do. Let's start by looking at mailing selection. And remember, this is the list of all people that we have. The people on your list may be members, you may call them clients, they may just be contact people that don't really work with the organization, but you want to be in touch with them, city officials, whoever it may be, all are on this list, and we're going to select the ones we want using selection tools here. Now, the first criteria for selecting, very simply, do we want everyone or do we only want certain people? So by clicking one of these two choices here, we can include all persons in our mailing list, or we can start choosing based on different criteria. Now, let me point out one thing over here on the upper right corner of the form. As we go, it tells us how many in total we have. We'll go in here and you'll see that there's two numbers, total count of 12, email count of 8. So as we go through the process of selecting, we always know exactly how many people we have on our list. And of course, this is a combination. If a person appears on more than one list, for example, they're only going to count once in the total. And how many of them have email addresses to help you decide how you're going to contact them. Okay, let's go back over to our selection. Right now it says include all persons, so everything down here is grayed out. When we switch to include only persons, now we have these choices. And there are 3 choices on the first level. We can choose by status, and we can choose by type. And we saw the person status and person type on the person form. And again, those are selections of your definition. You decide what the names of the different types are or what the different statuses are. If we select either or both of these boxes, we see that a list of choices appears here. Okay, let me turn those on and off so you can see that happening. If we want to select by status, there's our list of statuses. And if this list is longer, of course, it scrolls. If we want to select by type, our list of types appears. Again, this list could be longer and will scroll. So we can do either or both of these. Now, which statuses do we want? Well, we simply check. We don't want active, we only want inactive and suspended. Let's just start with that. And let's look at our count up here. We had 12. And I'm going to click the button that makes it happen, select for mailing, and the count will change. If we can look at the upper right corner, we see that the total count dropped down to 2. If I turn off this selection and select again, we're back to 12. So very simple to do. Let's look at these other choices over here. We have our status, we have our type. Now, we have up to 4 other criteria, and we can use any one of these 4. Okay? Let's take a look first at what these 4 criteria say. We'll move in a little bit on that. We have the ability to select by mailing list, by certification, by zip code, or by the organizations they belong to. Any one of these: mailing lists, certifications, zip codes, organizations. And of course, let's just start with mailing lists. And now, when we look over to the right side of the form again, we'll see the 3rd selection list. And here's our mailing lists that we can choose from. So, backing up, we have up to 3 criteria: status, types, and any one of 4 other choices: lists, organizations, zip codes, and certifications. So by going through all of these options, checking the people you want or don't want, we have shortcut buttons. If you want if you, for example, you wanted to mark all but one, it would be easier to go mark all and then unmark. So again, just for your convenience. And whenever we've set our criteria, this doesn't reselect every time we make a choice, because there's so many different choices you can make. We have a button to make it happen, the select for mailing button, press it, and we get a new count. Of course, if we put in a lot of criteria, we may find that our count drops down to none. All right, so that's the method for selecting. It can be as simple or complicated as you want. Let's look at the whole form again. And we see again that the different choices appear or disappear according to the controls you use. And you can see the selection list change. Okay, so we've done our selection. Let's just go back to all people. Select, we have 12. Now let's do our output. Click the Output tab. Here's our choices. All of these are explained in detail here on the right, the button to make your choice on the left. Briefly, we can do merge to Microsoft Word, and that will give us all the person information in a merge file so that you can use their name, address, status, many other individual pieces of information that you can incorporate into the form letter when it creates the merge file for the selected people. You can output to labels, and you have a choice of different label formats, and you can set up your own label printer, special printer for just labels. You have the choice of outputting your mailing list to envelopes, or you can output only to email, and it will output only for the people who have an email address, of course. What's also nice is, since we haven't reached the point yet where everyone has an email address, is these 2 options that combine email with a paper mailing, either email and then labels, or email and then envelopes. And of course, what that means is that if the person has an email address, they'll get an email. If they do not have an email address, they will get a label or an envelope. Every time you do a mailing output in Facil, you also can print a report. That actually happens automatically. Let me output this to a Word merge file. It asks me where I want the file to be and what the name is, and you can set this up as a default when you first set up your system and tell it where you like to put your merge files. And we'll save that merge file. It just takes a second to do it. And now, every time I output anything from the mailing list, I have this new dialog that says Mailing Output Report. When you do the mailing, you also can get a report. By checking that I want names, mailing address, and so on, I can get all the information about the people I just mailed to in a report format so that I have a list I can work with in addition. So if I've done a mailing on labels or on emails, I have the list of people I mailed to. I know which ones got email and which ones got labels. I have a zip code count for bulk mailing, everything I need. This is actually the first time we see a report in Facil. So let me just point out, here's the button to run the report after I've made my choices about what options I want. And this is going to give us a full screen, and it's going to show us the report on the screen in a preview window. I'll give you a chance to see the whole thing. And there's the report preview. Looks exactly the way it'll look on paper. Now, why do we go to a preview rather than just sending the report straight to the printer? Very, very often the information you want in a report You just need an answer about something, one piece of information. By putting the report on the screen, you may very often find the answer you want, and you don't need to print the report. Or maybe you just need to print one page out of a multi-page report. You can do all of that with the report preview. You can go through however many pages there are. You can choose to only print certain pages, and of course, right now we're seeing the information, so if we just need the answer, we might choose to not print it at all. So here's an example of the mailing list report. It has every name and address, tells us at the top here that it was a merge, and if we go to the bottom, here's our zip code count, telling us how many people were in each zip code. So that took us into what a report preview looks like, and how Facil shows all the reports in preview mode first, and then lets you print them. And of course, you just click the print button on the toolbar when you're ready to commit that report to paper. So every time we do a mailing, we're going to have the mailing output, the automated email, mass email possibility, and then the report, which can be optional. You can do or not do that report, and tells us who we mailed to. You also have, finally, the option of doing just the report. It may be that what you really want is just a printed list of those specially selected people, after you've decided which mailing list it is and whether they're active and so on, and made all those selections. By clicking report only, you would get just the report without doing labels or email or word merge. Facil tracks organization information, whether those are nonprofit organizations, city entities, any organization you may deal with, both the contact person and all the members or other people you have in your database who are affiliated with that organization. Here's the organization form. It has 3 tabs. We'll start with the basic organization and contact information. We see that we have the organization name, a status, a type, again, of your definition, and then the contact information, name, address, email, phone numbers, and notes. We can also copy an existing person. If they're already on your person list, we can copy the name, address, phone numbers, and so on from there. But we keep this separately because sometimes there is no person, for example. It may just be a title. You may send it to supervisor or whatever, and you can treat this a little differently than you do a regular person record because you don't have to fill everything in. Primary distinction is that the organization name is what identifies each individual organization, and as you fill those in, that's what will appear on your list. We can then go to the second tab, which is the affiliated persons, and we simply have a list of all the people affiliated. Now, if we have a list that we want to enter, for example, we can do it from here, pick the name, and enter it. Next one, and so on, and add all the people we want to know who is affiliated with this organization. Of course, we can look at other organizations and find out who's affiliated by selecting them from the list here, and there are the people affiliated. The third tab for the organization form, expenditures. Works just like the expenditure form you saw related to people, but of course this is based on the organization. So it's going to find all the projects that this organization is associated with, find all the reservations for facilities and resources, and tell you exactly what their consumption was of value of equipment and facility resources for any time period that you want to analyze. We'll go back to the main tab of organization contact. You notice there are also 3 command buttons: envelope, email, and project viewer. Of course, envelope will quickly print an envelope for the organization we're looking at. Email starts an email, and the project viewer will take us to a list of all of the projects that this organization is affiliated with. So there's our organization management, including the affiliated persons. Now, just as a review here and to see how data relates, if I go back to the person form, okay, and if we take a wide shot, we'll see that we have both forms open at the same time, person and organization, and we see that we can look at this in either direction. If I'm looking at the Tucson Softball League here, I see Dan Burstein is affiliated. If I look for Dan Burstein's person form and organizations, there's the Tucson Junior Softball League. So there is the relationship, organization and person, person and organization. Let's also look again at these link buttons. I'm going to close the person form, look at the organization form, and if I click the link button here for Dan Burstein, it's going to take me directly to Dan Burstein's person form. If I'm looking at a different person, let's pick somebody, organizations. If he's a member of this organization, and I click the link button, it takes me to that organization's list. Junior softball, junior softball. So there you see the relationship between persons and organizations and a little of the power of that linking system. You'll want to be able to contact organizations you've kept records of in Facil. So we have an organization mailing form. And it works exactly like the person mailing form, but it's really much simpler. There are only two possible ways of selecting which organizations you're going to mail to. You can select them all, of course, that's the default, and it tells us here that we have 3. Or you can say, I only want to select for a certain status or a certain type. Again, your definitions for these different selections. So here's my organization types that I want included. Here's my organization status that I want included. I can mark or unmark each one. I do my select for mailing. Let me turn these choices off. Select, we have 3. And then if I go to the output screen, I have the exact same choices that I had on the person screen, but now I'm dealing with this list of selected organizations. Again, I can do a word merge. Of course, the information for the organization is a little different in terms of what's available in the merge file. It's all the information about the organization that you saw on that form. And then, of course, address, labels, envelopes, email, combinations, and the output report.